I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and in this video I'm going to show you how to take a regular quilt block using the quilt as you go method that I use for all of my applique quilts and add a faux wonky sashing to it. And I say wonky sashing because when you use this sashing method, it's really easy to do and there's almost no measuring, and you end up with blocks that are all tipped in different directions. So it's a really fun and playful kind of fake sashing. And this is what one block will look like. So you can see that the sashing is not the same width all the way around, and the block is tipped a little bit, oops, let me get that, tipped a little bit in one direction. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to frame the block, and then there's going to be a companion video that is the next video that I'm going to record that it shows you how to bust out of that block like I've done with this frog. So he is catching flies from the horse's block with his tongue crossing that border between. So this video is all about how to build that frame, and then in the next video I'm going to show you how to break out of that frame. In the blog post that goes with this video, I'm going to show you some pictures of quilts. I can't really hold an entire quilt up here, so I'm going to show you in that blog post some photographs of quilts where you'll see several blocks together, so you'll see what that effect will look like. But here's how you make it.
Okay, we're going to start a little bit different than what you usually see me do for my Quilt As You Go blocks. Normally, we cut the fabric square 11 inches and the batting square also 11 inches and then quilt them together. I don't put batting on, or the backing on, until after I sew all of my blocks together. For this method with the wonky sashing, fake sashing, we start with a little different sizes. Normally I trim my finished blocks after I do all the quilting to 10.5 inches. In this case, I start with a 10.5 inch square of fabric and a 13-inch square of batting. I quilt that backing square to the batting, just like normal for me. So you can see my quilting lines a little bit clearer on the back. And then the next step is to lay in my applique. And I'm not going to do all of that because it's a little bit bigger size. I need to be the camera needs to be a little farther away from it. So I'm not going to bother showing you how to layer all of that in. I'm just showing you here all of the pieces. This is going to be a little horse that I'm putting in here. And when I come back, that will be all fused and outlined and ready to move on to the next step, which is adding the wonky sashing around it. So be back with a finished center part of the block. Okay, so I've got the horse appliqued in there. One thing that's really important to think about when you're doing this wonky frame sashing around there is to make sure that you get your applique lined up so that the raw edge where the head is, normally it's the head or the shoulders chopped off, is lined up with the edge of the block. Because this, more than anything else, makes him look like it's a framed picture. And what you want is him to look like he's just in the frame, kind of cropped out of it. You don't want a floating head in the middle of the frame with a visible cut off neck, because that's just weird. So the next thing we're going to do is start putting the frame in. And for that, I use just strips of fabric. I have found that 2.5 inches wide gives me plenty of coverage without having to be skimpy. In order to do this, I use the stitch and flip method. It is so easy. If you're not familiar with that, we're going to lay a strip down here. I'm just going to start with the bottom edge, and you just cut your strip to the width there. I'm going to lay that right sides together, and I'm going to take it back to my machine, and with a 1/4 inch-ish, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't have to be a super accurate 1/4 inch seam, but with a roughly 1/4 inch seam, I'm going to sew this seam, and then I'm going to flip this down and press it into place. And it's going to hang off the edge of the batting, and that's totally fine. I'll show you how we're going to deal with that later. So for right now, I'm going to take this over and stitch that, and I'll be right back. All right, so we've got that first one. I sewed it I flipped it down, I pressed it, and then I actually did a couple of lines of quilting. Let me flip this over. You don't have to do that, but I really like the way it's going to crinkle up when it's been washed if I do that extra stitching, and I like to do it with each strip. It just means I don't have to turn any corners. I just go down and back and forth a couple of times. So that is one strip. Now we're going to do another one. It does not matter which one you do next. So I'm just going to do this one. So I'm going to sew along this seam, and then I'm going to press it down, and I'm going to do some quilting over that, and then I'll bring it back again. All right, now we've got the bottom and the side, and I'm going to do across the top edge. And just like the others, I'm going to sew it 1/4 inch-ish, and then I'm going to flip that over to cover the batting. Okay, now we've got the top edge in, and we've got one more strip we need to put on. And I'm going to lay that one down. So now I'll take this one over and I'll sew that last seam. Flip that over, press it, and quilt it, and then I'm going to show you how we trim it down to size. Okay, so I've got all 4 sides on there, all 4 parts of the frame, and the batting is completely covered. So what we've done is we've made a block that's quite a bit bigger than we need it to be. So the next step is going to be to crop it down to size. If you remember, we cut the batting 13 inches square, and I'm actually going to trim it down to 12.5 inches so that when I sew all the blocks together, it's going to be a finished 12-inch block. And to do that, I'm going to do it just like I would normally trim a block. I like to use my big square grid ruler for that, but there are other methods. I'm not going to show how to do that exactly here. I'm just going to, because I've got already a whole other tutorial showing how to do that. I just wanted to show you that I'm going to do the cutting from the back so that I know exactly where the batting ends. So when I'm trimming my block and I'm finding that 12.5 inch square in there that I want, I'm going to do it from the back side so that I know that I'm not cutting a block where part of it is just fabric with no batting in there. So I will come back and show you the finished trimmed out block, cropped down to size, and then I want to talk a little bit about the fabric that I chose for that frame. All right, we have a finished block. It is trimmed down to 12.5 inches. So when I sew it to its neighbor blocks, each block is going to finish at 12 inches square. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fabric choices. For this one, I did all of the frame strips in the same color, but you don't have to do that. You can use all different fabrics. I really like to do a scrappy effect, and you can do 4 different shades of purple, for example, would be really nice. For the quilt that I'm working on here, I'm going to do all of the bindings, all of the sashing, in the same brown. So when the finished quilt is all put together, it's going to have kind of a lattice look that all of these become. And they're all tipped a little bit, so it's really playful and fun. You'll notice that in some places the sashing is quite a bit wider than others. And when I join it to another block that has the same sashing technique on it, those are going to blend into one line. And I'm going to show that in another video where I'm working on the second block. So this one showed how to frame the applique in. In the next video in this little series, I'm going to show how to make him bust out of that frame. So there's still going to be the wonky sashing frame around it, but our applique piece is going to be kind of overflowing the borders of that frame. It's really, really fun, and I will show that to you next time. But before I leave on this, I just wanted to remind you that all of the details, all of the measurements and everything are going to be written out in a companion blog post. If you're watching this on YouTube, go to the description, and there's going to be a link in the description to the blog post that has the other information. And I'm also going to show you there a whole bunch of other samples of what this technique can look like in larger quilts. So have fun with it. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.